When people ask for feedback, they usually mean, please don't hurt me, give me good feedback. Tell me where I did well. When you get negative feedback, constructive feedback, whichever way you want to label it, it's always seen as a bad thing.
Should we just all follow the rule, take feedback in silence?
My suggestion is to actually respond, and you can automate this with tell me more.
Can it go wrong? Like, can praises become like a washy-washy type of exercise?
Well, it's a very good question, right? Am
What's
I
your
allowed
take?
to swear on this podcast episode?
I'll mark some time. You go, I'll mark some time, but we're gonna peep it out.
In actual communication, talking is not communication. Writing is not communication. They are tools to communicate, but often they're not useful.
We should have done this live editing. Welcome back, everyone, to another installment of Mastering Tech Growth. Today, we have Adelina Chalmers, who's a founder of Geek Whisperer. She advises CTOs, head of engineering, and all the tech leadership. And, she does improve the performance of the teams and other things, among other things. She's very much respected within tech community here in UK. And also, she's a top voice on LinkedIn. Welcome, Adelina.
Thank you very much for having me.
I hope that introduction wasn't too bad.
Brilliant, don't worry. And I'm very impressed you did the silent L, Mike.
Here you go. I tried your name a couple of times. So welcome, Adelina. Tell us who you are, did you end up in tech, and effectively, what you're currently doing.
Okay. I ended up in tech after about 13 years ago, after working in human rights for about 8 years. And I realized that I can improve the quality of life of people much more if I work with tech companies than if I work with the government and charities. And this is actually why I changed my career in my late 20s. And what I'm doing now is I'm on a mission to transform engineers and their leaders to make them more conscious leaders and make the engineers also more aware of what the business actually needs from them, help them understand what their job is truly about, because I'd say 99% of engineers don't actually understand where they add value to their job.
That's a very strong shout. And I think I forgot to mention in our introduction what we're talking about today, which is the importance of the feedback, or the feedback culture in general towards the, in the startups, in the big enterprises. Doesn't matter the size. We know that giving feedback and receiving feedback is effectively how we all grow. So to kick off, Adelina, why is feedback important?
Well, it's extremely important because without knowing how you're doing, you're not really sure if you're doing the right things. And also, you will be making mistakes that you don't even realize you're making. It's what I like to call the unknown unknowns. And without feedback, you don't even know that you are not doing a great job, or that you're doing a great job. You could be unconsciously competent, which is you're good at your job, but you have no idea that you are. But the worst part is when you're unconsciously incompetent. And this is where feedback can be really useful. But unfortunately, many people take it as a personal attack.
That's a very strong statement, and it is very true. Somehow people are actually quite bad at receiving a feedback.
Yes, and there's biological reasons for that. I can go into them if you like. But...
Yes, please.
Okay, so the biological reasons behind why most people get threatened by feedback is because they usually didn't grow up in an environment where constructive feedback, especially, everybody, most people want to hear how great you are, right? Most people want to hear you did great, you did well, lovely. But actually, when people ask for feedback, they usually mean, please don't hurt me, give me good feedback, tell me where I did well. But biologically speaking, when you tell them what they didn't do well, that's seen as an attack. And there's two reasons for that. One is the way they were raised, because perhaps in their family, in school, if you think about it, when you got negative feedback in school, usually it was associated with a bad mark, and it was considered a bad thing. Feedback, if you think about it, when you get negative feedback, constructive feedback, whichever way you want to label it, it's always seen as a bad thing. So that's the kind of social connection to feedback that says it's bad and is negative. But also, and it's an attack to me, but also biologically speaking, when you get something you don't like a negative feedback, and you are socially not conditioned to see it differently, as, for example, an opportunity to learn and grow, which is how I like to see it, then you react with fight, flight, or freeze, which is an amygdala, a emotional limbic system part of the brain that has automatic reactions, just like it does when you're hungry and you're thirsty. It has these automatic reactions. Whilst instead of thinking about feedback with your neocortex, which is the logical part of the brain, people get very emotional about it. And this is my first clue. If you feel negative emotions about the feedback you just received, ask yourself, what was it about that feedback that made me feel these negative emotions? Because it's you, it's not actually the other person. Even if the other person was rude, it doesn't matter. It's how you take it inside as well.
Should we just all follow the rule, take feedback in silence?
Take big feedback in silence. Do you
Yep.
mean not respond to negative feedback?
Well, just in general, I heard that, and that was practiced on me. Just take feedback in silence. Like, I'm gonna give you a feedback. Don't try to defend yourself. Don't try to explain yourself. Just be silent. Let me give you that feedback, and then take it, and walk away. Think about it.
Yeah. So there's a few layers I'd like to unpick in that statement, because I can see why someone would say that, but a level better than that would be to say, when you're given feedback that you don't like to receive, because there's feedback that you like to receive as well, right? And it's interesting, isn't it, how we're interpreting feedback as feedback is a neutral term, but psychologically we are these days conditioned to see feedback as negative. And that in itself tells us something, that when we talk about feedback, we don't talk about positive feedback, we talk about negative feedback. That's the sort of feedback you're talking about, isn't it? Because the good feedback, everybody goes, oh, thanks, that's great, oh yeah, awesome. Most people, actually, I have met and I have worked with a few people who don't like positive feedback, and I can talk about that later and why that happens. But negative feedback, if someone gives you negative feedback, my suggestion is, the thing is that it depends the context of that feedback. If you are completely silent and you requested this feedback, and this person went out of their way to help you, to come forward and say, oh, by the way, are you aware you're making this mistake? By you being silent, it almost feels like a rejection to the person delivering the feedback. And my suggestion is to actually respond, and you can automate this with, tell me more. If you have anger towards what's being said, if you have fear towards what's being said, if you feel like they're telling you rubbish at your job and you feel, oh my God, imposter syndrome is overwhelming you, those three magic words, tell me more, have saved me in my career more than any other three words I can tell you about. I love you doesn't save me as much as tell me more.
Okay. I get it. So it's just you inviting conversation, right? You're inviting the person to continue digging deeper, maybe in what they want to feedback to you, and it doesn't matter what you feel. You still go, tell me more.
Yes, I have two examples. One of them very recent that I can give you if you like, when this happened to me.
Yep, of course.
Okay, so you might be aware that recently I launched some courses online, one on Udemy, called How to Transition from Engineer to CTO in under 3 years. One for CTOs, which was about how to get engineering budget from the board. The one about CTOs in particular, I got a CTO that I've known for many years, absolutely delightful guy. But I heard through the grapevine saying that he was open to giving me some feedback about it. So when he said that, I knew feedback meant negative feedback. So I jumped at the opportunity and messaged this guy and said, hey, I heard that you have some feedback for me. I'd really love to hear it. I knew it wasn't going to be good, right? Because he said, I have some feedback through the grapevine. Otherwise, he'd have just messaged me. He has my phone number. And we had a phone conversation, and I asked him, tell me, and he said, "Oh, I think your video is pointless. Nobody's ever going to buy it. I don't think it gives any value. I think you should just put it for free on LinkedIn. Why are you trying to sell on LinkedIn and on YouTube? Why are you trying to sell it? This is never going to work. I don't know what you're trying to achieve with it, but it's not going to work." And there was a lot of, it's not going to work, it's not going to work. Keep in mind, actually, at this point, I had already sold hundreds of pounds worth of this video within about a week so of launching it. So I became curious and asked a bit more about what was it about the video that's not going to work. I understand you think that, which is fine, but what is it about it? And I got some amazing feedback about, and this is why the wording on that video sales page is very different now than it was when he gave me feedback, because he started telling me more about, well, how's this helping me? Is this going to fix my problems? Why shouldn't I just get it for free? Everything else is for free. And those questions helped me dig deeper and understand that I hadn't actually spelled out on the sales page why this is not uploaded for free on YouTube. And it's magic like that I would have never gotten had I not leaned into the negative feedback. I'm not going to say initially I felt like, where's it coming from? This feedback, I don't understand what he wants from me with these questions. Initially I couldn't get it. But actually, the more I asked him deeper and deeper questions about these things, and sometimes I didn't even know what to ask. I just said, can you tell me more about, this is not going to add me any value? Tell more about that. How come? And that was magic. Like now, my description on my website has changed, and I have to tell you, I get even more sales than before.
So it's very similar to what you would do with the product launch. You want to just lean and talk with your potential customers and your existing customers and effectively proactively seek out that feedback and just go like, what did you like? What didn't you like? How can I make this more valuable to you? So leaning in that feedback, and that applies as well at work, right? So if you hear people talking, maybe someone mentions something, effectively what we advocating is go out. If you hear things like that and just seek that feedback out. I heard you said something. Can you give me more? Tell me more.
Exactly. And, most of the time people are too emotional, to be honest, to ask constructive questions. This is the problem. The moment you start giving me negative feedback, my limbic system kicks in and goes, attack, attack, attack. So then they start deflecting. They start, asking all sorts of questions, or, like the typical when you're pulled over by a police officer and the officer says, you're over the limit with your drinking or whatever. And they go, yeah, but what about these other guys? Much more over the limit than I am. Things like that. That's just deflection, right? So the magic was that, tell me more, you can automate. You can automate to say that. It's not very hard to remember. But it takes for you to observe yourself in the moment, the emotions you have, rather than going with a natural tendency of defending yourself or arguing back or fighting back.
Yeah.
Or indeed staying silent, which is freeze, by the way. And this is why I'm saying that staying silent can work for a while to an extent, but really, if you want value out of the conversation, and also, frankly, this is a piece that is not talked about enough. The person who's giving you constructive/negative feedback, most of them are genuine people because it's uncomfortable for them too, and they are worried about your reaction. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't appreciate, that thanking someone for giving negative feedback, not as a cynical thing, but genuinely thanking them, because actually it's exhausting for someone to give you negative feedback. There are occasions where obviously keyboard warriors and all that, but really if you're in a meeting with someone, online it's a different kind of story, to be honest, but face to face with someone or an email that you receive at work or something like that, take the time to thank the person for raising the issue to your attention and then discuss it deeper rather than being angry with a messenger, because they might just be a light in a tunnel for you.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it absolutely requires courage to have these difficult conversations and give that feedback. So if you are in leadership position and you're giving a constructive or course correcting feedback, you will need an amount of courage to actually sit down in that conversation and give that. And people who did that knows exactly what I'm saying. And on the receiving end, yes, you absolutely, you're afraid of how that will impact that person. The intent is not to diminish, not to cause, any other negative impact, right? But it might land like this. So you are very aware of that and how you're delivering. So on receiving ends, emotionally speaking, I love how you said, just catch the emotions, lead with it, tell me more, and then go think about what that actually means. Like, why did you respond that emotionally to this? Like, what's the lesson in that? Like, there's a reason why you went and became emotional to that feedback, and that's where the lesson is. So if we flip this side and we go like, what about positive one? That's much easier to give. Like, hey, you're doing great. Hey, that project, that was awesome. You did this thing that was amazing. That feels like easy to give. But I've been part of teams which positive feedback or praises were very, very low. Like no one was just complimenting each other.
Mm-hmm.
How do you sort of get the team into a habit to give each other positive praises?
Brilliant question. One of the things that I think a lot of leaders underestimate is the fact that the rest of the team copies them. So I would invite you to look at the leaders of that team or department you are talking about. How much proactive feedback were they giving people when they were doing well? How outspoken were they about the good stuff that the team were doing or their managers were doing? And that's the thing, that everybody copies the boss. And when you're a CTO or a head of engineering or even an engineering manager, you're the one who sets the tone for that feedback. Is it happening? Is it not happening? And I'm going to stop there because you're welcome to ask me. This could go in lots of different directions afterwards.
Mhm. I love the lead by example, and you're 100% right that you setting the tone of how things should be done. I love when people, have understanding that you don't need to have the title to, express leadership capabilities and go like, you know what, maybe my leader doesn't do praises or give feedback. I will, like I seen someone doing well. I know what, that positive praise will be good and accepted positively. So I'll go ahead and do that. I love when people think like this as a, maybe senior developers or within the team in general. But yes, if leadership doesn't do that, I feel like people may be thinking that it's just not how things
Exactly. It's
should
not
be.
acceptable here. This is the
Exactly.
thing. And the other thing, that every person who leads a team, it could be an engineering manager, it could be even a team lead if they're, the kind of the strongest technical there. It could be a director of engineering, a head of engineering. It doesn't matter. They create their own subculture unconsciously most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. Even if your boss doesn't do it, you can do it with your team, and you can get that subculture that's positive. And sometimes people see the difference in your team and they want to copy it, and that's how
Mm-hmm.
that culture spreads from the bottom up. But it's very rare because most people copy their bosses naturally.
Yep, I do agree. So talking about praises, I love. I think the book is called "How to Win People and Influence." No, how to make
How to
friends
make
and
friends and people,
influence
Dale
people, right?
Carnegie.
Yeah. So it talks about a lot about giving praise and being specific. When you give a praise, so how specific is specific when it comes to giving praise? From your perspective.
Oh, brilliant. I wrote a post about this about 6 years ago, I think.
Okay,
And
let's dig into that.
yeah, it's really important, right? So for example, um, if you say to someone, George, well done on that project, brilliant job, George will assume he knows what this boss, let's call her Mary, is praising him about.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't actually know if Mary thinks that well done for that job was because he delivered the code perfectly, or because he did it on time, or because there weren't too many bugs, or because there weren't too many customer complaints. He has no idea. So that kind of praise is pretty useless, to be honest. It's not very helpful at all, other than, oh, well done, kudos, whatever. The next level of praise is to say, well done on X. well done for finishing that on time. Well done for delivering that code with so few bugs. Well done for testing it properly before you sent it out. That's the next level, which is better, but not perfect either. Because then they know what the good stuff is about, right? But the third level of feedback, which is the gold standard, as I like to call it, is to say, George, well done for testing the product or testing the code thoroughly before you sent it out. Because compared to the other features that we released in the past, this time we had 5 times more customer retention than we did last time with this feature release, or 5 times less complaints, or 5 times more people messaging back saying this is really helpful. Talking about the impact of the good thing they've done. So what they've done well, the impact of what they've done well, not just well done, you've done something, but what's good about it.
Mm-hmm. So effectively, well done for testing the product out, and as a result of that, we had 0 incidents, after it went live or something like that. So effectively, exactly what it did, and the impact it actually had.
That's right.
Okay.
And most of the time, people don't follow that entire chain. Managers don't follow that chain. They don't communicate with the other departments to be able to give that kind of answer to the engineers. Because the problem is that from an engineering only standpoint, you can't figure that entire chain out. You need to speak to customer success. You need to speak to customer acquisition to understand how was this compared to the other releases we made.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Okay, that's a golden standard. So we're setting a golden standard that we have. Be specific. That's how, what exactly they did and the impact they had. Think about that when you're giving the praise. Can it go wrong? Like, can praises become, like a washy type of exercise? Like, can you overdo it it's almost, they become counterproductive?
Well, it's a very good question, right? So to me, it's all about meaning and context. So for example, if you keep telling people, well done, George, regardless of how well George did or not, if George doesn't get negative feedback, constructive negative feedback, when he messes up, the good praise doesn't mean anything because there's no opposition. There's no difference. He can't correlate the good feedback with the stuff he's doing.
There's no counterbalance.
There's no counterbalance. There's yin and yang. There's no counterbalance. If you can't relate the good feedback you get with the negative feedback that you get, then you become complacent and think everything is fine. Why do we need to bother more?
Yeah, I'm doing everything okay. I'm just getting praises all the time. Like,
yeah,
what's the problem, right?
Exactly. And this is what concerns me. When I ask my customers, if all of them tell me I'm great all the time, I always worry. Because I know I can't be perfect. There must be something that I'm doing wrong sometimes.
And as well, if you don't get that constructive one, you don't even know where to actually to improve yourself. It's like, am I already at the top of the Everest? Like, I'm the best of the best and the best I can be, which is probably not true. Like, at any given point in time, we have plenty of things we could improve. So that constructive feedback is the balance you want to seek out if you're not getting by default.
100%.
Okay. Can you overdo it? I mean, which one are more important? Like, I mean, we sort of said that it has to be a balance, but
yeah,
should you be leaning more towards constructive criticism? So you want to know, how to grow. So that should be, let's say, a ratio of 6-4, something like that. Or should you be getting more praises and less constructive criticism so you don't, feel diminished in any way? Or is it just like 50-50?
Well, I think it depends on the performance of the person, to be honest. For me, it's about honesty and authenticity. Like it has to be reflective of the reality of their performance. But I would say, I have had situations actually recently where, I did a joint project with someone. They didn't perform very well. I had some negative feedback about their performance. This person was part of my project. They was delivering something for me. And I didn't actually tell this person about the negative feedback he received. I told him only about the good feedback that he received. And the reason for that is because I knew he'd be crushed if you saw that negative feedback. And I know exactly why he had that negative feedback being given to him. And therefore, sometimes as a manager, as a leader, you have to know and know your people and understand if this is the right time to give them that feedback. So I only gave him the positive feedback, and that made him want to go out of his comfort zone and do the stuff again. But next time we did it, I actually just gave him some tips that would have fixed the issues that came up in the previous without him ever knowing 5 different people complained about it.
Mm-hmm.
Because what's the damage on this person? I knew he would be crushed if I told him that. And he wouldn't have tried to get out of his comfort zone again. And that's the difference. You know, as a
Okay.
leader, this is what separates leaders from managers, frankly. If you are a true leader, you not only just kind of churn out what you're told, you put it through a filter, you analyze the situation, and then you decide, is this the right time or is this the best way to deal with this problem? And that's not being disingenuous. You're still helping the person because you're giving them gently some guidance on it and how to do it differently next time. And if they, for example, think, no, it doesn't matter, I'm not going to change that, then you can kind of gently start kind of introducing and saying, well, actually, it can come across like that sometimes, but most of the time you don't need to get there. You don't need to tell them, I didn't tell you this, which is what I used to get, by the way. I would insist that people explain to me what's the evidence for this, to the point that my managers would have to tell me 5 people said that you are not good at this. And then I'd feel paranoid because she didn't tell me that, right? But this is what you have to understand the person. I welcome feedback. She was scared of giving me feedback, but I welcome it. But maybe this person, other people don't. Other people are scared of it. Other people feel humiliated by negative feedback. I don't. I quite welcome it because I can look at it as something to build upon rather than let it tear me down.
Is it the maturity piece to welcome constructive feedback? I like, if I think about myself, I know that in the beginning, I was not accepting it as a champion, let's say like this, where eventually becoming myself a leader of people and learning a theory of leadership, I recognize the value of such feedbacks, where now I seek out and I welcome it. But in the beginning, I'm like, who's this guy telling me that stuff? Like, I don't like that, right?
Yes.
So is that like a maturity piece? Should we expect people to grow into accepting constructive feedback, or is it more like a mindset, like a growth mindset situation?
Well, I'm not sure I can tell a difference between maturity and growth mindset, because the difference between someone who's mature or has a growth mindset and someone who doesn't is essentially they're able to look at, let's say, the context of feedback. They're able to look at that feedback and analyze it for what it is. For example, sometimes feedback is rubbish. The amount of times I've been told by a few very senior CTOs that, launching, for example, that video will never sell to anyone at all. Their opinion was, I'm going to get £0, $0 for that video because it's absolutely worthless. And yet, I've sold over £1,000 worth of stuff, of that video in the last, 6 weeks, 2 months it's been on. So, you have to take feedback with a pinch of salt, but this is where leadership and maturity and a strategic mindset, and this kind of growth mindset comes in. You take the feedback, you analyze it, you take the value out of it, and then you discard all the other stuff that actually there's no value to it. Not all feedback is valuable, but actually not all feedback is valuable, but there is value in every piece of feedback, because if nothing else, it tells you about the limitations of that person. That's the thing. And if you let that person influence you and tell you, don't do this, it's not going to work, before you even tested it out. Most people don't step out of their comfort zone to do the things that experienced people told them it's not going to work, because they're scared of being proven wrong. Everybody wants to be right all the time. Having the growth mindset means that you don't mind being wrong sometimes.
Yep.
You don't see it as a failure. You don't see it as you being less of a person. When we make mistakes, we're not less of a person. We're just a person who made a mistake.
And there's a lesson in every mistake. I can't remember exactly which book, when it comes to growth, talks about the fact that you should proactively seek making mistakes. Like if you're not making mistakes, you're probably not pushing yourself in, outside of your comfort zones, or you're not pushing yourself into the zones where you don't know everything. Because
Yeah.
by default, if you think about growing, you have to fail. Like you have to make mistakes, learn from it, get feedback, and do better.
Yeah.
So it's like if it's always good, then you're probably sitting in your bubble to some
Yes.
extent.
Yes. And
Hmm.
this is a message for all engineers out there, especially the alpha geek engineers, the ones that see themselves as the best engineer in this room or this company or this department. This message is for you. If you're listening to this and you never accept or receive negative feedback, you are missing out. People are not telling you, but there'll be plenty of stuff they want to tell you, but you're not listening to it and they're scared of your reaction.
Hmm. And when you're talking about this, I have at least 3 people in my head.
Everybody does. Everybody has 3 people at least in their head like that.
Yeah. All right. So in this modern world we are right now in, which is heavily remote, is there a difference of how you do feedback? What I'm thinking is, in normal situations, I want to do face to face. I want to see people's reactions. I want to see how they feel. I want to be in that situation with them. In remote, it's often Slack message, an email, and it's just sort of like a fire and forget. Right now, just I'm sending out. It's there. Like there's no feedback loop in that conversation. Is
Yeah.
there a way you do feedback in like a remote settings?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things actually I'd like to say about this because if we're talking about negative feedback specifically, because when we say feedback, I want to clarify the kind
Yep.
of feedback, right? But the
Constructive.
hardest one, right? The
Hmm.
hardest one is the negative slash
Yep.
constructive one, right? First of all, the person receiving it has to trust that you have good intentions, you have their interest at heart. They have to trust that you're not there to sabotage them with your negative feedback. Now, in order to build that, you do need some kind of physical contact, or lots and lots and lots of chats online, seeing each other, not seeing each other, but you need lots of contact. Ideally, like one of the companies that I work with, they meet remotely. They're a remote company, fully 100% remote, but they meet once a month around Europe, in Spain, in Germany, in France, in Italy, in Bulgaria, whatever. And this makes the team like, wow, this is really cool. We're visiting various European cities. Awesome. It's a European company. But they also get to experience things with each other. And it's much harder to be a keyboard warrior or speak behind people's backs when you know them face to face. Because
Hmm.
one of the problems with feedback is that often it goes underground. What people are actually thinking is underground is not told to your face. But if you, let's say, are the manager and you have some negative feedback to give to this person, my key tip to you would be build a relationship of trust with this person first, and you build that by having lots of contact with them, getting to understand them, and literally having the conversation. How do you normally react when you receive negative constructive feedback? What's your initial reaction about that? And that's before, literally as part of your introduction when you first meet them as a person. Learn to talk to people to help them observe themselves. Don't just talk to people about, oh yeah, you're doing this and you're doing that and you're doing the other. Get to know the person and help them observe themselves. If they complain to you about someone else, help them, query them with, tell me more. Why do you think he made you feel like that? Why do you think he came out and talked to you like this? Why is he like this? Why is he like that? Why? Till you get to the bottom of, because he made me feel humiliated. Why did it make you feel humiliated? And kind of literally almost unpicking someone and their perspective and the sort of things they see as humiliation. Because what you see as humiliation, I don't see as humiliation.
Okay. So you still need to build a little bit of relationship, or much better build a lot of relationship before you go into that
100%. Yeah.
feedback.
And also this kind of feedback matters, like I said earlier, do you really need to give them negative feedback, or is there another way of helping them correct that behavior? Because right now the cat just died or something. Do you see what I mean?
Hmm.
Take that negative feedback into context. Don't just throw it at people. It's all over the screen. I can just shut it off afterwards. It doesn't matter. There is a real human being behind that screen, and they will have an impact, and they will see you differently after you give them negative feedback for the first time, for sure.
Okay, so that's in a way like how we nurture the psychological safety, right? Because
Yeah.
we're going to build out the relationship. We'll have some trust. We'll talk
Yes.
about that process before the process actually happens,
Yes.
and then we'll take the person into that process. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Is there like a framework potentially used? And when I say framework, the only one which comes to my mind is what is known a feedback sandwich.
Oh,
We go
yeah.
like good, bad, good. Like, is there any
Yeah.
like
Yes. Am
what's
I
your take?
allowed to swear on this podcast episode?
I, I'll mark some time. You go. I'll mark some time, but we're gonna peep it down.
Right. Okay. I won't swear. So I wrote an article. I think it's public on Medium called "The Alternative to the Sandwich,"
Hmm.
and because so many engineers call it the sandwich,
Yep.
and I I wrote that alternative, which gives you a framework of explaining things whilst being authentic and not having this kind of good, bad, good. Because then people are expecting it. They know what to expect. But if you start with the bad, like let's say you've decided this is the right time to give them the feedback. You've decided the only way to correct that behavior is through feedback, because there's other ways to correct the behavior as well, by the way, not just through feedback or correct performance, whatever it is. There's
Hmm.
many other tools you have at your disposal. And let's say that's the right thing to do. If you start with, oh, well done, George, you've been a great engineer so far, blah, blah, blah. George is now discarding mentally everything you've just said that's positive
Yeah. They
because he's
just shut
bracing
down.
for impact,
Hmm.
right?
Yep.
So, like I used to love when I've done lots of these things now. So I know what the engineers are thinking. The engineers go, oh, come on, what do you actually want to tell me? Like skip to the important part, right? So how I give people feedback is I skip straight to the important part. I go, you know me, I'm straightforward. I'm not never gonna give you hot air. I'm never gonna lie to you. I'm never gonna treat you like a child. This is what this is what you did. This is how it impacted other people. This is how it came across. This is what had been helpful for you to do. But that's my perspective. Can we discuss this and unpick it a little bit more? What made you want to do it like that? Or, sometimes you can just go, tell me more about why you did this like this. That's a softer version of the feedback. But sometimes you get to the end, you get to a point where you're like, I don't know what else to try with this person. And that's the formula. When I don't know what else to try with this person, that's the formula I use. Like, bam, straight to the heart of the matter. This is what you did. This is how it impacted. This is what we'd have liked you to do. What stopped you from doing that? Bam. And then there's no kind of like surprise, they're not waiting for anything. The waiting has happened straight ahead. You can, hi, how are you? And give them heads up. You are going to talk about this as well. Don't blindside people. This is the thing that people hate when they are in face-to-face feedback. If you don't tell, I want to talk to you about something. Well, it makes me worry the entire time they're going to talk to me about something. Tell me what that something is in advance. And if you like, you can even say to them, would you like me to tell you what I'm planning to say? And then we can discuss it when we're face to face. So then they know exactly what it's about. You're not shock and awe. You're not using shock and awe in the
Mm.
meeting.
I personally like, not like, I love in advance or agenda setting. So like
There you
someone
go.
goes like, we're gonna go 1-to-1. I'm like, give me a bullet list what you want to talk
Yes.
about, because I want to
Yeah.
come prepared. I want to be
Yeah.
participating in and giving you values, because sometimes you're gonna give me something and the only thing I can answer is like, thank you for this. I'll need to think about it, so I'll come back to you, which
Yes.
prolongs the
Oh,
whole span of the situation.
yeah. Exactly. And this is the thing. Different people operate differently, but most of the time, it's much better to tell someone what this is about. And write it out for them and say, this is what happened, this is how we perceive. I want to discuss how we can do this better in the future. And then and kind of say, take some time to think about this.
Hmm.
But here's the thing, this all has to be accompanied by the culture, by that psychological safety, by that relationship of trust. How do you set things up normally? Do you tell someone when you start working with them, this is how I normally do things? Do you want it like that, or how do you want it? And giving them the option. Because
Hmm.
some people don't want to receive the email. They just want to know, oh, let's have a catch up. That's all they want, and they just want to be blindsided. Some people prefer that because it means they're not worrying the entire time. Some people prefer to have it in writing ahead of time so they can think about it and process it, and then they can actually have a proper response and not feel fight, flight, or freeze attacked in the meeting because you already know what it's about.
Yeah, I love
But it's
that.
again learning, what does this person want, and
Hmm.
talking to them about it. So few managers, when they start working with someone, they don't ask them, how do you like to do things? When if I have bad news, how would you like me to give it to you? By email in advance or tell you in the meeting straight out? Have those conversations, because I bet you'll be the first manager who asks them that. And they'll actually, this is a self-awareness question, by the way, because you know yourself what you prefer. Like that you have self-awareness in that area. I have seen it, by the way. The way you send me the agenda and the invitation, everything is hyper organized, hyper structured. I think you're an architect, aren't you? A software architect.
Used to be.
Used to be. I can see that. It's brilliant. I love it. And for me, I mean, it made my life very easy. But 9 out of 10 podcasts I do, I don't get an agenda at all. I'm just told we're going to talk about some leadership stuff.
Come join. I mean, this is fun as well because it's
It
it's,
is.
a box of surprise, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
But I thrive on being put on the spot. Other people don't. Other people much prefer to get an agenda like you sent out,
Mm.
which I think is very calming to a lot of people, very reassuring to people who don't want to be put on the spot. I love being put on the spot.
We should have done this live, Adeline. But you were talking about all these great things of how to give the feedback, effectively make sure it sticks, right? Understanding your audience in a way. It's in a way it's the same as giving presentation. Understanding who you're going to be talking with. Make sure you deliver it in a way they can absorb as much. But often that's not done, and often on a receiving end of a feedback, you get this like vague feedback, and you don't even like, is this good, is this bad, like what's going on? It's like you don't even know what's the message behind the feedback. And I was on the receiving end like this couple of times. What's your suggestion if a person receiving a feedback and goes like, I don't know what you mean? Is that like, tell me more, explain what you mean, just simple as that?
Yeah. Are you able to? Can you think back at an example so I can give you specifics of how what I would say in response to that?
So I was getting a feedback, which I believe, well, not believe, but now I know it was about how I talk and the fact that I swear too much in the meetings, right? And I'm coming from a country which is called Lithuania. Uh, English was a second language to me, and I never thought about, saying, the words which I cannot say right now, but
Sure.
that was just the way I talked, right? And it just didn't rub well to some of the execs, and they were like, like, do you talk like this with clients? And the feedback I got was like, I didn't understood, is like, what he's saying, I swear too much, or is this a bad style, it's a style who doesn't sell, or am I diminishing people, like, what are you saying to me, right? And I walked out of this room, and I was like, I don't really know what happened over here. Like, so I circled back, after a couple of days. I was like, this is how I understood. And I sort of listed back, and they were like, no, that's not really what I meant. And yeah, what I listed back is how I received the situation. And after that, that was my like main learning about the fact that there's a saying is that the worst thing, no, what's the saying? It's about communication. I think the biggest misunderstanding is that the communication took place.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
something along
Yes.
these lines where
Yes.
two people talk, and
Yes.
they both think that they communicated something,
Yes.
and they walk away, and it's not. Like, one thing's another than what another wanted to say, and that's exactly what my session was about, and that's
Yeah.
affected the context behind feedback. It's like, how do you actually know that you understood the feedback in the same way the person was giving to you?
Yeah. Brilliant question. I actually wrote a post about it 7 years ago as well, which is on LinkedIn, I think, as well. It was a bit of a communication protocol, I called it. But it's exactly what you just said now. you go back to them and say, what I understood was this. Is that what you meant? And I will tell you, was this in Britain? Was this in England?
No, it was in Britain, yeah. And I was
Yeah.
like 2 years in, so the
So,
English was still like
yeah,
shaky for
yeah.
me.
In the British culture, we are very soft about feedback. We are very roundabout. We go very much in a roundabout way with feedback. And most people, unless they're British, and sometimes even British people, if they are sometimes on the spectrum like I am,
Mm.
don't understand what on earth was that about. And this is why clear communication, like you did, going back and saying, this is what I understood. Is that what you meant? And they go, oh no. Then that's, that literally I made a little communication protocol. When you answer, when you send a who is, and you have a command prompt answer. It's the same sort of thing, but in actual communication, talking is not communication. Writing is not communication. They are tools to communicate, but often they're not used properly. And
Mhm.
this is something that a lot of people think, well, I've been talking for 45 years. I know how to communicate. You know how you talk, you know how to produce noises and sounds, but it doesn't mean your message got across. It doesn't mean the other person will be able to pass on what you said accurately. That's why you get Chinese whispers.
Yep. So if I'm giving a feedback, should I go like, can you tell me how you understood my feedback?
Yes. Can you tell me what did you understand from what I've just said? I ask this question all the time.
Okay.
What did you understand from what I just said? What
So
stuck with you?
we've got two great things. Tell me more and tell me back
Yes,
how you
love
understood.
it. Tell me more and tell me back. Absolutely nailed it. Very, very good tools when you give or receive feedback.
Okay. So we're getting better at this feedback now, right? So let's say we are leaders, we just learn all of these things. We applying. How do we measure these unmeasurable positive impacts our feedback sessions are actually giving to the team? Is like, how do you quantify
Mm-hmm.
the effect of feedback, positive and constructive, within the team? How can you go back to stakeholders and go like, this initiative I'm driving now around, everyone's giving feedback everywhere, is yielding that result?
Well, I mean, one of the tools that a lot of companies use, is employee engagement, like
Mm.
thymometrics or a piece of software like that, where you can actually see, do we have different numbers? When we ask the same questions about how, for example, if your employee engagement survey asks how often or do you feel able to give feedback to your boss or to your peers, before 30% said yes, now 60% say yes. But also another way you can measure it is, I mean, you look yourself in your team. Have they been bringing up issues more often with each other and worked through them, which means that they delivered something faster, or they avoided a big disaster, or they avoided a big, kind of rewrite or whatever? It's kind of looking at the chain reaction. It has, does Mary now challenge John when he talks over her, or she still keeps quiet? Or does anyone else challenge John when he talks over Mary, or does everyone else still keep quiet? Is this kind of, again, as a leader, you're observing from above, you're looking and trying to see the patterns.
Okay, I love that. An engagement survey is likely the tool where, the only way you can measure things is by surveys, 360s, and just asking people around. It's no real tool you can put in place. Engagement survey is a good one. I do love a simple approach, which I think it was a Spotify who shared it in their blog post like 10 years ago, something, which is called a squad health assessment module, which is as simple as, every sprint or maybe once a month, you have just a team coming together. They have like a voting from 1 to 5, and they have different topics like, healthiness of a code base, collaboration, teamwork, processes, support and things like that. And you just vote on these, and like feedback culture, or just exchanging
Mm-hmm.
feedback could be one of these
Yeah.
things. And you have this like a polls, as a team lead or as a leader you can get. So that worked quite well when I deployed it. So just a shout to that health assessment module. So okay, so we're measuring now. So we know that really works. And can we overdo it? Adeline, can we actually go from maybe giving a feedback like once a week to start giving a feedback, more often? And we're actually causing distraction in a way. It's like if we're giving constructive course correcting feedback, we're giving to you often, and people, they go right and then they go left, and now they back to center, and then, and it's just like becomes a little bit like a ping pong. Is it possible to give feedback too often?
Well, absolutely it is. I mean, this is why I was saying earlier to use your discretion as a leader. Even if you're an engineering manager, there's a difference between behaving as a leader and behaving as a manager. Use your discretion as a leader to look at almost the ratio of cost benefit. And the cost benefit ratio for feedback is, if I give this person negative feedback again this week, is that the best way to get the result I'm after? Because you have to focus on the result you're after, not just on the output of just constantly giving them feedback. What is the result you're trying to achieve by giving someone constantly feedback on this? And this is the point I'm trying to make, that it's not about the process, do it every Monday, do it every time they make a mistake. Coach them every time they make a mistake. And if the coaching doesn't work, then you can move a gear up to feedback. Don't just give people feedback constantly, because actually you might be making also, when we decide to give someone feedback, we make a judgment call on what's happening, but we sometimes don't have the full picture. For example, when I said to you earlier that I received feedback saying this is never going to work, this person didn't know, because they don't have access to my sales track. It was just, you see what I mean? So it's sometimes the feedback is misinformed. You haven't got the full picture.
So there's an element of subjectivity.
100%.
And we want to be as objective as we can.
Yes, and nobody is 100% objective, right? We all see reality through our filters. However, jumping straight to feedback, I think, is quite a blunt people management tool.
Okay.
It's definitely not a people leadership tool. Leaders coach. You don't give feedback that much in that sense, in the traditional sense. I'm sitting you down, I'm telling you how to do it better.
That's parenting. Sorry, I jumped in because the moment you said, I sit you down and tell you what they do, I'm like, me with my kids, it's like, don't do this.
I mean, without sounding patronizing, to be honest, there's a lot of areas of crossover, let's say, between parenting and management. It's different between parenting and leadership. And that's another conversation we can have just about that.
Yeah, I do agree. I mean, I don't know why, but with the kids, you could coach them as well. I mean, maybe they too young, too small. I don't know why, but as a parent, you feel like, I'm just going to tell you how to do things. And then it's just a bad mindset in general, right? You do want to approach that in a coaching manner and just ask the questions and allow the person to reach those conclusions by themselves. But as a parent, sometimes you're just like tired, annoyed, and you just go like, just do this. Just that. It's just that. Like, just go ahead and do that. And sometimes you bring that to work as well. So
100%. I mean, you've just proven my point that,
yep.
Feedback is a very blunt tool for managing people and helping them, so coaching them. And this is the thing though, coaching also requires the other person to have a certain level of knowledge and development to be able to do something with said coaching. You can't really coach, I think, a 3-year-old. I don't have children. I've never had children. I'm never going to have children because of my health conditions. But I can tell that when I see, my friends' children, after a certain age, you can ask them questions and make them think for themselves. And in fact, it's encouraged. But you can't coach a 1-year-old, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old. You just, and it's the same with some people at work. Some people at work, sometimes in some contexts, you initially have to tell them what to do. and you have to start with the sharp blade first, and then with
Mm.
time you help them, you coach them. It again customized to the people you are managing and the culture you're in.
Yeah. When you were saying this, I remembered in one of the startups we had a lot of like new graduates which we took in. We had this agreement with the, I think it was London Imperial College, where we would get like interns for like 3 to 6 months. And there was a year or so where we rotated a lot of them, and some of them were very coachable, where they would
Mm-hmm.
come in and they would come in with this mindset like, I'm coming here to learn things.
Yeah,
So, so I'll ask the questions, I'll take the feedback, I'll go
yeah,
improve. And
yeah,
some were just like, don't tell me what to do, man. It's like, so
yeah,
it's like, that's where you need to think about people, how they receive things, why they're here, are they
yeah,
coachable, or just
yeah.
approach it almost in a unique sense. Okay, so we have this question, Adeline, which is in the spirit of the show, and it goes like this: what is one most important factor for any tech venture growth?
Oh, crikey! But do you mean, okay? If I'm gonna be blunt, the most important factor in tech venture growth is actually market timing. I
Okay.
know it's a bit outside of people control and people want, but if you look at the research, the timing of when you started, what you started, how important is the problem you're solving is seen, that is actually a very, very big factor to growth. This is why every time a CTO says to me, how do I convince my board to give me more money for engineering, to hire more engineers? Or a CEO says, how do I get my investors to give more money? My question is, why do you need more money now? Why don't you need more money in 3 years' time? What are the signs that right now is the time to be riding that pony and grow?
Okay. I love that. Market timing. How do you recognize a good timing?
When, for example, let's say, I mean, let's say you're in, I'm going to give you actually an old example because everyone will be able to understand this one. I was thinking of giving a newer one, but it's not quite as defined. So think about YouTube. When they started, not everyone had broadband. Not everyone had good, strong computers, strong internet to be able to play videos. But by the time they had started uploading videos and they started having lots of people uploading, contributing things, more and more people had broadband. More and more people were had mobile phones and smartphones that they could record themselves easily and upload it easily, and sometimes not even need to upload it from mobile to computer, but they could upload directly from their phone straight onto YouTube because there's an app now. All of these elements together, there were signs. For example, if your customer doesn't have the bandwidth, the internet bandwidth, or there's 5 different steps to be able to upload their video onto your platform, probably the market is not ready yet. Look at the
Mhm.
customer experience, customer journey. Is everybody talking about it? Is everybody doing it? And also, is there a historical pattern to people wanting to be on video? Because if you think about it, before, not many people were on video, and the ones who were paying for it as a special occasion, like a wedding or a birthday or a christening or whatever. But once this is accessible, will people want to do it more? And the answer was yes. People want to do. So it's kind of all these signs that tell you, even historically, that these kind of actions are people that actions take, and if it's even easier for them to take these actions, they will do it at scale. It's
Okay.
kind of these signs.
Let's try to apply this to AI right now.
Yes, that's what I was gonna give the example of AI, right? If
So,
you, yeah,
yeah, go.
yeah. I mean, if you look at it, so I was talking to John Cricket yesterday. He was working for an AI company 12 years ago. Why was that not as
Mm.
fervent as it is now and as well known by everyone outside of tech? Because ChatGPT didn't exist, and regular people, even your grandmother, wasn't able to use ChatGPT. Was even your grandmother, if she has an iPad or a laptop or whatever, she can go on ChatGPT and ask a question and get an answer. That's why AI is much more important now than it was 12 years ago, because a regular person can start doing it easily.
Right. So it's just at the fingertips for the common person
Yeah,
to utilize, which means any product we
it's
spin out
accessible.
is accessible. Okay. So we're saying effectively market timing is, to some extent, is accessibility at scale for whatever you're building.
Yes, pretty much. And or
Okay.
also, for example, market timing. Like, if you think about it, if something happens, like there's a new legislation coming in,
Mm.
or a terrorist attack comes in, and facial recognition in queues all of a sudden is really important.
Mm-hmm.
It's looking at events happening around, frankly, in the world, in the media, in your industry, and spotting that opportunity as the wave grows. It's a thing. Facebook wasn't the first kind of platform like that, but it was the one that caught the right wave at the right time. And to be honest, there's a huge element of luck
Mm.
involved. Convincing the right people at the right time to spread the word about you, that's crucial too.
I love that. That's a soul of entrepreneurship, isn't it? Just be within the trends, follow the news, have your channels, and just spot when the wave is coming, and then just ride the wave up,
100%.
hopefully. Okay.
And this is, can I say something actually about tech strategy and how it's linked to this?
Yep.
A lot of CTOs struggle to build tech strategy, and they think it's some magical thing that they need to figure out, and they feel really blocked about it. The thing about tech strategy is that if you worked on the business strategy with the rest of the C-suite and the board, tech strategy is a breeze, because the hard part is to look at the industry you're in, to look at the environment you're in, and make a business strategy that makes sense. How do you get from where you are now to that vision that you have? That's the strategy. So once you have the business strategy tells you what you need to do with the tech strategy, because the tech strategy is, well, considering where we are with the software right now, how does it need to go? How does it need to change to be able to hit those goals that the business just set up in the business strategy? It's as simple as that. It's not as complicated as people imagine it to be.
Yeah, simplicity is genius, or genius is in simplicity. How's the saying go? Simplicity.
There's genius in simplicity.
Genius in simplicity, isn't it? Yeah. So if the things are complicated and you're actually struggling to explain to someone else what you're doing, it's probably not the best way of going about things. It should be very simple to explain strategy as well. It's like, here's what we're going for. Here's how we're gonna get there. Quite simple. Not as simple actually to make it happen though.
That's another story. Execution.
Yep. Exactly. That's another big topic, isn't it? The execution itself. Okay. Well, I don't have any more questions, Adeline. When it comes to feedback, I just want to thank you for coming, sharing your wisdom. And, before we part ways, is there anything you would love to leave our listeners with?
I would say that, keeping in mind the topic of the session of this particular episode, if someone gives you negative feedback and especially reached out to you to give it to you, look at their motives, but don't jump to conclusions they're trying to harm you. Look at what's the value in what they've given you, because it could be a beautiful present.
That's very lovely said. Thank you, Adeline. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. Brilliant having you. Excellent questions.
Cheers.